I just finished watching this movie called Whatever This Is with this awesome soundtrack. It has Alyssa Milano in it. It was made in like 1982, and you can hear that it sounds all like vaporwave, like Chinese and shit. That's the only way I know how to describe it because it sounds sort of Chinese. It sounds like new agey in that way. It sounds Chinese, and I've always thought that it sounded Chinese. That this kind of music because I haven't seen this movie before. I don't even know what it's named again. But I was watching it over the day, and what is it like? It's like a sort of Home Alone. It's interesting. I've tried to cut back on making movie reviews, but I decided this was cool as shit because the lighting is on point, looks indie. A lot of 80s movies just don't have that indie edge. I saw this one, who's that pedophile? Uh, Pomerano? The guy who Charles Manson killed his wife and he moved to Italy. Well, you see, he had this one movie where it was based in just this office complex or whatever. Like, you might go to a school. This is what movie is called. It's called Old Enough. And, yeah. So he had this sci-fi movie, Ray Polamano, whoever had moved to Italy, very famous director. Wife was killed by Charles Manson. And that was just set in some bullshit. It kind of reminds me of a Flight of the Condor, or Operation Condor, or 3 Days to the Condor, or whatever that movie was called with the blonde guy. And he's like, I'm blonde and I read a lot. I'm blonde and I read a lot. I don't know why I'm part of this operation. I don't know. 5 Days to the Condor. Kind of an okay movie, but sub Running Man. It's not ridiculous enough. Running Man has that sauce. And then you have stuff like, what's that movie? Serpico, which I didn't watch all of because it seemed kind of sellout anime, sort of like drugs movies, and it sort of seemed like they were trying to give him too much BDE, big dick energy, which I disagreed with because, I don't think. All I'm saying is I agree with Stav from Cometown that no cop or whatever the Stav thinks about that movie, I think. Because I was too lazy to watch it all the way through. Running Man is much better because you have a Nazi in that. But anyway, what is that trail of qualifiers and tangents supposed to convey upon you, the audience guy? Well, you see, this is a New York movie, and this is an indie movie, and it's sort of Home Alone-y, but not phony, because I think Home Alone is phony. I think Home Alone has a suburban child man who displays all the signs of intelligence, but then goes into this sort of nascence and this vulnerability, which is this sort of trope, coup de grace trope, Deus Ex Machina of kids' movies to make parents agree with them, where you're like, okay, but we're also gonna have them be like, danger is bad for you, danger is bad. Which is, just pandering to parents. People criticize kids' movies for being like, oh, you pander too much for kids. I think they pander too much to parents. I think they pander too much to these fucking boring ass parents with these values like, what if we made a movie about if emotions were people? And we made a movie about how, like, when you're angry, you're a different person, but you have to blend all emotions because that's healthy. But your emotions might have emotions about their emotions. You know, this sort of stuff is fucking bullshit. I haven't seen Inside Out, which is what I'm referencing. But, you know, my number one critique, I was thinking about this earlier, is that, you know, we constantly try to say to kids, oh, you are smart, but you just don't believe in yourself. You don't believe in yourself enough. And we think it's always been that way, that like we have all this content being like, you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe that you can do things. But, you know, how much of that is just CIA operations? How much of that is just, you know, business, this sort of like educational model that we already have, trying to corral people into like this sort of controlled uh, economy of confidence to be like, uh, it's a hack point because this is said by like 25-year-old man children threatening people online and doing racism. But there is really, to put it in massive scare quotes because I think it affects both genders, there's really a holocaust on masculinity in our elementary schools. But not really just a holocaust on masculinity. It's just, you know, this enfeebling of the middle class, where, you know, you're funneled into these extracurriculars. You gotta play in band. You gotta join RFCA or whatever, instead of gym, whatever that thing the military is, and then you become this sort of watchdog, this brittle, bitchy watchdog who's like, think about the other person. Fucking hell. Fuck. I hate that shit. What about, like, doing extracurriculars and participating with other people automatically makes you this, like, civically minded, responsible fucking, like, shrink in whenever there's a challenge, bounce back with, oh, it's unfair. This socialized group of nerds that, like, okay, full uh in disclosure, I'm sort of I'm sort of ragging uh, I'm sort of ragging on the friend group that I used to have in high school because you know, I mean, like, the friend group I had in high school wasn't complete tools, you know. I believe that because, you know, I don't like to believe I hang out with massive tools. Um, but overall, this sort of undergirding of counterculture and all that shit in this establishment framework of, like, extracurriculars, you do like band and all that stuff, and then you go to like 1, 2, 3 level, you go to science and you're like, oh, I want to work for Boeing. Fucking Christ. Yeah, science for making weapons and bombs. Why not? Why not science for making uh um for making sex toys and bongs? Oh, shit. That's a good joke. Okay. No more face on camp. Anyway, massive tangent. Um, uh, so I can only imagine, because I went to public schools in like a wealthy county, in Fairfax County, right outside of DC. I can only imagine what like private school does to you. That's sort of like, that's why 13 Reasons Why is the best show ever. Because this is America. This this is America. Don't catch you being insane. Literally everybody in America has this thing like, am I crazy? I have three voices going on in my head. And it's like, no, but by definition, we have this sort of collective insanity induced by the fact that, you know, our education system, right, which was built in the late 1800s and is based off of the Prussian school system, which tries to get you into the workforce, into the military. It was originally an education system that was in the military. Uh, so that has not been reformed as much as sort of developed alongside this sort of like social justice stuff. And of course student protests have been a massive source for change, but as a mainstreaming sort of holistic thing rather than an immediate thing which influences people while they are still in it, as a sort of fluid institution soaking all over our sensitive areas, and inside our sensitive areas, uh, cutting out any, pressurization that would impede any such entrance. Uh, good, good for us. Um, in that view, really, if you look at what has happened going from the sort of rough and Hold'em 1800s, which, it's obviously retarded. There's obviously still violence back then. There's still like upper class sort of snootery, to the 1900s, where, sure, we lost a bunch of like brutality, but at the same time, that happened at the expense of a sort of like working class identity, which fades, and at the expense of a sort of broad ability to be abnormal, to sort of not be knowingly, systematically compared to a vision of normalcy, which is what happened with Freud, with consumerism, with the excess, the surplus economy that makes you work night shifts, that makes, you have to make the 50 billionth baby toy that uh, waters lawns, that makes golf, that does tourism, that does uh, the boats that they go out on, and then like there's zombies on the boats, and there's old people partying, cruisers, and so this change of culture from the 19th century to the 20th century often uh, seen more as a change from the 20th century to the 21st century, because we lack hindsight. We think we don't lack hindsight, but we lack other people's hindsight. We only have so much hindsight, and we don't have hindsight for our hindsight. So if you said, oh, that was a mistake, sure, but, it was a mistake that you crashed the car, but it was also a mistake that, you know, you bought, I don't know, a car with, I don't know, like 8-wheel drive, but also 0-wheel drive. Let's give that as a complicated metaphor. So what I'm saying is, like, we should bring back child labor because the Newsies were really cool in, like, the 1910s. Like, he's a scab. Don't be a scab. I mean, if you think about it, elementary schoolers are not organized. I'm not organized even. What the fuck? This video is an unorganized mess. But yeah, so, yeah, what I like about this movie, I'm gonna go back inside to see what the movie was called again, is that, it avoids this moral lesson thing that you see in so many kids' movies that I don't fucking care about. I don't care about the fucking moral lessons. The world is a shit place. The world isn't really a shit place. It's just shit. And it's like, you can't moralize shit. And in as much as our modern world works, in the 19th century, people imagine them as having been clearer cut. What is the movie called? Damn. However, where's the history? However, you see, in the 20th century, things are less clear cut, but they're even more strictly preached because people don't have an idea about the complexity of the world. People think that you should serve yourself to be simple, to deal with the complexity of the world, but it's really the other way around. The more complexly you state yourself, the less interpretation or sort of like waffling around can be done to your position. And the current thing, the system that we have, lets all this reform go by, in my view, which is in like, oh, it doesn't matter because, you pass that reform, right? But now, through some tweak, from some quirk of our insanely specialized system, although you have certain protections for this way of life, this living that you've make a living out of it, those protections are now gone because instead of this, you have this more innovative thing for the hip guys, which people naturally hate because you're emphasizing hip. But how much of this hipness is just to provide insecurity, to avoid a stable, strong workforce? I don't know. But yeah, that's what I think about the movie. Let's see. I watched Starstruck first. Starstruck is a good musical. It takes place in Australia, and they do punk shit. And I think it sounds cooler because it's like glam punk, so it's like not trying to sound like zero effort and like, yeah, I don't care. It's trying to sound like maximalist, which is cool. Yeah, I watched this, and then Old Enough. And so this is what kids' movies should be, I think. Because, Home Alone is shit.